Hey kids, wanna see a dead body?
Hello, I'm Pluto Burns, and there have been so many alternate world mangas where a guy just ends up in an alternate, somewhat video gamey fantasy world with powers, and I just can't even deal with the flood right now, but there were two that came out recently that I just have to talk about. 'Cause the gimmick is that they're about farming. Like, not grand adventures in wizardry or becoming a monster. No, just farming. I don't... Why? They go by the titles Isekai Desu ga Mamono Saiba Shitemasu and Isekai Nonbiri Noko. I'm going to refer to them as farming monsters and farming in another world, because fuck those titles. Okay, so farming monsters isn't the worst thing I've ever read because it does a couple things that are a little refreshing for these alternate world mangas. The guy he leaves his apartment and suddenly he's in a fantasy world and he's like, well, I guess I'm in a fantasy world, that means I have powers. Alright, so let me see my stats, and then he gets like creamed by a giant bird. So he drags himself to town and is like, I don't have any powers, what is going on here? He's like, well, I guess I'll get a job. No one gives him a job, he has no skills, he doesn't know anything, why would anyone give him a job? So one day, he discovers a bunch of food getting thrown out of a restaurant, goes dumpster diving, and is like, hey, I can plant this seed from this, I don't know, apple core, and then I can have my own food. Okay, in reality, that would never, ever, ever work, but this is a fantasy world, and in like 3 days, the seed he planted has turned into a giant carnivorous plant that tries to eat him. Now this is where the logistics of the world come into play and are weird. Apparently there are no regular plants here. There are monster trees and monsters. The monster plants and monsters are all food sources that adventurers go out and hunt. And the life cycle is that the plants drop eggs that turn into monsters, and then the monsters have like seeds inside of them that when they die turn into plants. And there's also seeds that just turn, and some of the monsters just look like plants. Like, one of the characters is a talking jack-o'-lantern. Okay, so that's weird, but it's got like a logic to it. Like, I don't think I've been in a fantasy world like that before, but I at least follow the thought process. And it turns out that the only reason this guy is any good at farming is because no one knows how to farm here. They just hunt wild plants and animals, and no one's even tried to plant the seeds intentionally. So even though his farming techniques basically amounts to dig trench, put seed in, water, that works. That gets the job done in this world, and he's considered a genius magician herald of a new way of getting plants. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. I'm actually kind of on board with that setup. The problem is in the execution. First of all, the artwork is terrible. I know I'm putting a picture right here. It's cramped, there's no sense of flow between panels, the timeline is so accelerated you can barely keep up. Like, that pumpkin is supposed to be his first friend. The pumpkin just shows up one day and is his friend. We never see them becoming friends. And there's this whole thing about there's gonna be like a bunch of heroes who are gonna like get involved because he's doing weird stuff. And they're just shadowy in the background. I'm like, why does anyone care? This guy's operation isn't big enough. Like, yeah, he's doing something that upsets the natural order, but he hasn't taught anyone else to do it. It's also really heavy on the cutesy artwork, like with this Mandragora who tries to seduce him even though she's like that big. It's creepy. I don't like it. Like, I don't like the art. I don't like the way the story is progressing, but at least the setup was interesting. Which is more than I can say for Farming in Another World, which is about as bog standard of another world superpowered fantasy as you can imagine, even though it's still about farming. So this guy dies, and we spend pages upon pages of him just talking to God, and God is like, well, you suffered greatly in life, so I'm going to give you a wish. And he's like, I'd like to not, like, ever get sick in this new world you're putting me in? And God is like, well, I can do that, but that doesn't feel like enough of a wish. Have another wish. And he's like, I'd like to be a farmer. And God is like, okay, let me double check that on my cell phone. Who the fuck are you calling? That's actually not a bad joke, but the delivery is terrible. And then God is like, yes, you can be a farmer, and as a bonus, I'm going to give you this super-powered farming implement that will take all the interesting elements out of the farming and do all the work for you. And that's exactly what happens. He shows up in this fantasy world. First of all, he's in the middle of the woods, doesn't encounter anyone for chapters upon, I think he just met someone at, chapter 10. And the all-powerful farming tool is so annoyingly overpowered. Using it doesn't cost him any stamina, so he figures the best way to get through the woods is to just plow his way through the woods. And it's so boring. He sets up shop, and it's just text boxes upon text boxes of descriptions of him doing all this stuff, but he's not doing it. The all-powerful farming implement is doing it. He doesn't even have to plant seeds. He just plows and plants grow. Yeah, he has to water them, but where's the fun? Where's the effort? It's not... This is exactly the problem most of these Elder World stories run into, is when you give your character god powers, you take away the fun of them earning shit. He doesn't earn this shit, he just goes out and does it. It's like playing Minecraft in creative mode. Except in Minecraft creative mode, the point is to just make creative stuff. Make yourself a working graphing calculator or a replica of a Death Star. You can just do that. Just go ahead and do it, because it's creative mode, it's not important, but this is supposed to be a story with stakes that goes somewhere and has character conflict, and this isn't how you do that. He bumps into some wolves who just breed on his farm and are his friends immediately, and they bring in a spider who eats potatoes and is like, yeah, I'll be your friend, here, let me make you some clothes, here, have a sweater, in the chapter that it shows up in. He doesn't have to earn any of this shit. Yeah, Monster Farmer, they speed over it, but they at least make a point of saying the reason the monster plants all end up liking him is because he's nice to them, which does call into question this world of sentient plants that people are eating, which clearly it doesn't want to deal with, but it makes the point that he earns this shit. So yeah, the farming in Another World is just awful. The artwork is a little better because the composition is better, but that doesn't change the fact that it's sketchy and bland. I can't recommend either of these. I'm recommending you don't read them because they're bad. I just had to get them off my chest. Wow. Oh, that feels good.